It's 8 days till the start of the World Cup, but 9 days until the U.S. men's national team's debut in the World Cup against Paraguay on June 12th. Of course, Australia and Turkey to follow in that group. They do have friendly on Saturday against Germany in Chicago on June 6th. The rosters are locked. And my biggest question to you is, we talked about this before the show, where 2022, we felt good about where the team was at the end of the World Cup. Maybe the process did not go as well. When you look at this squad in 2026 compared to the 2022 squad, which squad is better for you?
Well, I do think that there was an amount of progression, World Cup upon World Cup, cycle upon cycle, for some of the players. But I think as we start to look at, I guess we'll kind of go through it position by position. Is the U.S. in a better place now than they were 4 years ago? Are some of those players that we talked about getting better? So let's start first with the goalkeeper position, because now we do see Matt Turner had the Arsenal badge next to his name, and that was when his career was in the ascendancy. He was getting to a place where Arsenal were interested in buying a goalkeeper who statistically was one of the best we've ever seen in Major League Soccer. Didn't quite work out for him at Arsenal, didn't quite work out for him at Palace, didn't quite work out for him at Lyon, and now he's at New England Revolution and has to reclaim that position. He has been statistically very good again in Major League Soccer, but is he going to be the number one? I think you compare the other options, it really is whether or not you consider Matt Freese to be a genuine contender for the position. I don't think we actually know that yet, because we didn't see Freese against Senegal, and we'll see if we see him against Germany, if he is indeed going to be the opening day starter. But I think looking at this position, I would say it's roughly a lateral move, because it's completely dependent on how you view the form of Matt Turner going into the World Cup. I think going into 2022, you saw a goalkeeper on the rise, whereas now you kind of see him on the decline.
And you have, Freese has had opportunities to play with the national team shirt, so it'll be interesting what decision Pochettino does make. We switch to defenders now, another key part of this team that you would say did have a strength here for this team, possibly in years past. Would you say it's a strength now with this 2026 squad? I
think it is better in 2026 than it was in 2022. I think you see Anthony Robinson took a real step forward in Europe with Fulham. I think Serginho Dest was kind of in a period where he didn't really know what his level was. We saw him at Barcelona. We saw him at Milan, which is where he was contracted to at the start of the World Cup. But now at PSV has been a locked-in player for them when healthy, obviously. I think he fits really well into the group. We see Tim Ream 4 years on. That probably would be the one thing that you hold as a strike against. But the biggest point, I think, in the favor of 2026, C. Richards, especially if he's healthy. He has to be healthy, and we'll see what his status is going into that first game against Paraguay. But if he's healthy, I think that takes the group up a level. Alex Freeman, I think, has been a real welcome introduction. I thought he played incredibly well against Senegal. But I think in the overall, this part of the team, I think, has taken a step forward. You look at Walker Zimmerman being a key part of that back four, and it wasn't even Mark Zimmerman for me completely in his prime. He had some good years with Nashville, but I think it was probably around the LAFC years where you get him at his absolute best. Aaron Long, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Shaq Moore played at this World Cup as well. DeAndre Yedlin featured at times. I think the group of defenders now, even though I'm not saying it's a strength, I think it is better than it was 4 years ago.
And you could argue that Jedi Robinson has also increased his level. You spoke about Tim Ream, though. How much pressure is he feeling? And is there concern here, especially because he was given the captain's armband for this team now, so you expect him to be on the pitch with his age? Is there concern?
Of course there's concern. I think it is sort of interesting. You think about how sort of players you'd build the team around. You talk about Pulsic, you talk about McKennie. It seems like on the basis of trying to get him in the team, the U.S. is in some ways building around him because he is not a center back capable of playing in a back four, I don't think, at this point. You need Anthony Robinson as wingback cover. You need a central defender in the back three in order to cover for him as well. And so I think there is a little bit of, we need his passing so much from deep. Because without Tim Ream in the team, I think this team suffers pretty dramatically from a distribution standpoint. So the fact that he is in the team is an indication that they need that left boot in buildup. But they have kind of built around him, which I think is more than you would say for a player like Tim Ream at this stage. So I am surprised that he's still here. He absolutely is a vulnerability when we talk about the biggest games. The thing that I worry the most about is not even necessarily covering in space. It's covering in quickness, sort of that step to get out to an attacker who's about to shoot. I just feel like there have been moments in a U.S. shirt where he hasn't quite gotten there quick enough and closed down a tackle quick enough, and all of a sudden there's a goal flying past him. So that's something that I worry about. But yeah, I mean, of course it's a worry. You would rather someone else have taken that position, but nobody has, and his distribution, I think, is that important.
And that's why it's even more important to have a healthy Chris Richards going in. You mentioned him earlier. He has to be the most important player in this back line.
No question.
And he needs to be at the level that we've seen him with Crystal Palace this season. How much has this season, playing at that club, having big game experience, done for him as far as his level going into this tournament?
It's the ideal scenario. You go back to 2022, he was sort of in that in-between period where he was a Bayern player, but was he going to take the step forward somewhere else? He was injured as well before 2022. Otherwise, he might have played then. I think every player has to find the right situation for them. And Chris Richards went and found him. And I think that is one of the things that when you compare 2022 to 2026, several of the players that you look at from the 2022 squad that could be here right now could have found a better situation for themselves or stagnated because they made the wrong decisions in their career. Obviously, it's not easy to predict, but he was in exactly the right place for him, his skill set. He's a regular part of that team under Oliver Glasner. We'll see if that continues with the new manager, but he is a rock-solid player in Crystal Palace. It's a perfect level for him, and I think the United States is in desperate need of his regular contribution in this team.
Right, now let's shift over to the midfield for this USMNT, and we look here. I think that we expected turnover, not maybe the turnover that we ended up seeing here. You do have some of the same similar faces. McKennie's still there. Tyler Adams is still there. Gio Reyna, incredibly, is still there after not playing a whole lot. New faces like Sebastian Berhalter and of course, Malik Tillman has done a great job. What are your thoughts on this midfield for the U.S.?
Well, again, you talk about finding the right place in your career, and I think, you're looking at year upon year. I think Weston McKennie, while at the same club, feels like he's in a completely different situation 3.5 years on. He's a fantastic inclusion. Same for Brendan Aronson. It's the same logo next to him, but remember where he was, getting relegated the first time with Leeds, going on a few loans, playing well in the Championship, now being a part of a side that stayed in the Premier League. But the biggest name, I think, that leads me to seeing that this 2026 squad is better is Yunus Musah. Because Yunus Musah at that time was in a fantastic position and looked like he was going to be on his way in his career. That development was going to happen. He's completely fallen off since then. And so I think at that time, maybe we thought of that midfield as better, but I think the fact that you kind of see that his progression didn't continue maybe leads you to believe that maybe we weren't in as good of hands with Yunus Musah back in 2022, that maybe his development wasn't going to be an absolute given. So I think, look, Tyler Adams playing regularly is great. McKennie being in that spot now is great. So I think you have those two. I think Sebastian Berhalter has been a great find. I think he's a really good player and sort of underrated. We didn't even really see it in the Senegal game. Set pieces could become a huge part of the tournament, and Berhalter is a tremendous deliverer of set pieces. So, look, I don't think it's quite the level of hope that you had in 2022, but I think in real terms, these are better players.
I think Weston McKennie's versatility of how many places he can be deployed in the midfield is massive for this U.S. team. And the other one we didn't mention here, and of course, Gio Reyna is kind of a different conversation. But I think Malik Tillman is a huge add compared to 2022. He is a very talented player that can push up more of an attacking midfield type of role. And I think he can really help what is an attack with Pulsic, with Balogun, with Weah, if he's in there on that side, that can really kind of change things and help make their jobs easier in that attack.
No question, especially when you look at the games that the United States are facing. When you look at Paraguay, when you look at Australia, we expect these teams to be very defensive. And I think we saw, actually, I thought the best moment that the U.S. had in the game against Senegal was the moment that he creates. It's this little move down the right side, and he hits kind of a blind ball out towards that left side. I think it was Balogun, it was the save, rebound hit the post, then another save, and but it all starts with this invention and creativity that Malik Tillman, while looking this way, sees a ball all the way over there through this gap in the defense, and it was hit perfectly. I think when you're looking at having something to bring off the bench, maybe Tillman even starts, we don't know. But if you need creativity off the bench, it's a perfect kind of player to bring on. Obviously, Reyna, in theory, has that skill set. I thought he played reasonably well in the first 45 against Senegal, but we'll see what he can deliver in a bigger, heavier load.
Let's move on. In 2022, the biggest issue we had was the attacking line, the forward. Who was going to be that number 9? Who was going to take the reins and be the goal scorer for this team? Never showed up really in 2022. 2026 has totally changed when you're talking about Flo Balogun, when you're talking about Pepe and the form that they're in, to help out guys like Pulsic.
And even Haji Wright. Haji Wright probably came out of the World Cup with the most credit. Obviously, he was sort of in a period where he was playing in Turkey, but now he's part of a promoted side with Coventry that won the championship. If you had said you have a high-level goal scorer who's drawing the plaudits of Frank Lampard and getting promoted to the Premier League, great. Right. We'll take him on the plane. But instead, Folarin Balogun, by the way, the United States deserves credit for the recruitment. Greg Berhalter deserves credit for the recruitment. And I think Anthony Hudson sealed that deal over the line. To get him into the team, obviously, fantastic player who had a player of the season kind of campaign for Monaco. Ricardo Pepi, I thought, was absolutely fantastic in the game against Senegal and has genuinely taken on a role at PSV. That was the one thing that I was worried about with him, is it just kind of felt like he got stuck being a reserve player. Coming off the bench, making an impact from the bench, both for the U.S. and for club as well. He has started to become a starter. We saw his link-up play with Pulsic in the game. It actually has me thinking about whether or not Pepe should start at the World Cup instead of Balogun, which is an incredible Rolls Royce of a question in comparison to what the question was in 2022, which, if you recall, the game that the U.S. eventually loses to the Netherlands in the round of 16, Jesus Ferreira starts up front. And good MLS player, solid career. I just don't think he's national team level. So the fact that you now have a genuine question about two high-level performing strikers in Europe with another high-level performing striker in Europe as your third option, it's night and day. And then obviously with the wingers, you look at Pulisic in that left-sided area. Maybe at that time he's coming off a Champions League final win for Chelsea and was playing reasonably well, but I think now he is more settled in his career. If you look at his Milan career on balance, he has had a very good run of it in Serie A. Obviously, the second half of the season, notwithstanding. But on balance, he has taken a step forward. And I love Alejandro Zendejas. I think he's probably the most underrated player in the pool. I wonder how much we get to see him, because there are a lot of players ahead of him that have a lot of talent. But I think Zendejas, what he shows week in, week out in Liga MX as a leading player for Club America, this is a fantastic group of forward players.